A salesman at a luxury jet dealership insults a black man, assuming he can't afford the high-end aircraft. Arrogant and dismissive, he pushes the man aside, unaware that he's actually the billionaire owner of the dealership. When the truth is revealed, the power dynamic flips instantly. The salesman faces humiliation, and justice is served. A powerful lesson is learned. Never judge someone by their appearance. A luxury jet dealership, a cocky salesman, and a customer he never should have underestimated. Inside the sleek, high-end showroom, the air buzzed with quiet conversations between wealthy clients and polished sales executives. Expensive private jets gleamed under the showroom lights, symbols of exclusivity and power. Among the crowd, Marcus, a well-dressed black man in a tailored black suit, walked in, scanning the models with interest. But the moment he stepped forward, a smirking salesman, Richard, intercepted him, his eyes flickering with immediate judgment. "These jets are for serious buyers," Richard said smoothly, his tone polite but dripping with condescension. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable looking at something more affordable." A few nearby clients glanced over, some amused, others simply observing, waiting to see what would happen next. But Richard had no idea who he was speaking to. Marcus wasn't just another customer. He was the billionaire owner of the entire dealership. And when the truth came out, the salesman would be left humiliated in front of everyone. Have you ever seen someone get judged too soon, only to regret it later? Share your story in the comments and subscribe for more powerful real-life stories. The private jet dealership gleamed with modern luxury, its polished floors reflecting the soft glow of high-end lighting. Sleek aircraft stood proudly on display, lined up like luxury cars in an exclusive showroom. The air carried the scent of expensive leather and the subtle aroma of fresh coffee being served to clients as they browsed, each of them expecting VIP treatment tailored to their status. Among them was Marcus, a tall, well-dressed black man in a sleek black suit. He moved with quiet confidence, scanning the aircraft with a discerning eye. There was no flashiness to him, no gold watches, no over-the-top displays of wealth, just a calm, measured presence that naturally commanded respect. He was a self-made billionaire, a man who had built his empire from the ground up. And yet, people like Richard never saw that. Richard, one of the dealership's senior salesmen, was the kind of person who judged wealth at first glance. His eyes flickered over Marcus, taking in his presence with an almost imperceptible sneer. The expensive suit wasn't enough. Marcus didn't fit the mold of the clients Richard liked to impress, the older white executives, the generational wealth elites who came in wearing custom-tailored designer brands with a name he recognized. Marcus paused in front of a Gulfstream jet, its sleek body a masterpiece of engineering and power. "What's the range on this model?" he asked casually, hands in his pockets. Richard chuckled under his breath before stepping forward, putting on his best fake customer service smile. "Oh, this one's quite exclusive," he said, his voice oozing with politeness that felt more patronizing than welcoming. "Most people looking at a model like this are already aircraft owners. Have you flown private before?" A few other salesmen nearby glanced over, sensing the shift in tone. Some kept their focus on their own clients, but a few of them lingered, intrigued. A couple of wealthy customers sipping champagne at a lounge area nearby subtly turned their heads, curious to see how this interaction would unfold. Marcus didn't react, his expression unreadable. He had seen this play out too many times before, but rather than argue or correct Richard, he let the moment hang in the air, his silence carrying more weight than words ever could. Richard, mistaking Marcus's lack of response for hesitation, pressed forward, his smirk growing. "Now, of course, if you're just browsing, I can show you some of our lower-tier options. Some pre-owned models that might be a better fit." The words landed with quiet arrogance, and in that moment the lines were drawn. Marcus wasn't here to prove himself. He never needed to. But Richard had just unknowingly walked into the biggest mistake of his career. Richard's smirk widened as he looked Marcus up and down, his polished demeanor barely masking his condescension. "These jets are for serious buyers," he said smoothly, folding his arms. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable looking at something more affordable." His tone was dripping with fake politeness, but the message was clear. He didn't think Marcus belonged here. Marcus didn't react. He had heard this before. The assumptions, the subtle dismissals, the belief that wealth had a certain look. It was nothing new. Richard, mistaking Marcus's silence for hesitation, continued. "Listen, I don't mean to waste your time. We have some smaller models that are easier to finance if that's what you're looking for." A few feet away, a pair of wealthy clients sipping champagne exchanged amused glances. Another customer, a businessman in a tailored navy suit, barely glanced at Marcus before returning to his conversation. The unspoken agreement among them was clear. Richard was right. Marcus remained composed, unmoving, his hands still in his pockets. He had no intention of justifying himself. He simply observed, letting the arrogance in front of him continue, digging its own grave. Richard, growing impatient, let out a dramatic sigh. "Look, I have other clients to attend to," he said, already shifting his stance as if dismissing Marcus. "I suggest you check out some of our pre-owned models. I can have one of the junior associates help you with those." A voice from across the showroom interrupted. "Hey, isn't this dealership owned by—" Richard didn't let them finish. He raised a hand dismissively. "Owned by one of the biggest names in the industry, yeah. And trust me, he doesn't waste time. With browsers." For the first time, Marcus smiled, a subtle, knowing curve of his lips. Richard had no idea, but he was about to find out. Marcus finally broke his silence, his calm demeanor unwavering. "What's the fuel capacity on this model?" His voice was smooth, controlled, but there was an undeniable authority behind it. Richard blinked, thrown, off by the sudden shift. Well, he faltered, scrambling for an answer. He hadn't expected Marcus to ask technical questions. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "And what's the top cruising altitude? The engine thrust ratio?" Richard hesitated again, clearing his throat. I'd have to check the specs, but..." The power dynamic had shifted. The conversation, which Richard had been steering with smug control, was slipping from his grasp. His condescending mask was cracking. Then a voice from across the showroom cut through the tension. "Mr. Carter, it's great to see you again." The entire dealership went silent. One of the senior executives, dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, walked up to Marcus with an extended hand. His tone wasn't just polite, it was deferential. Richard turned slowly, his face draining of color. He looked between the executive and Marcus, confusion dawning into horror. Marcus shook the executive's hand casually, as if he had expected this moment all along. "Good to see you too," he said. The staff nearby stood frozen, realization sinking in. The man Richard had just insulted, dismissed, and tried to rush out was the owner. Richard stammered, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words, but there was nothing left to say. His arrogance had collapsed in real time. Marcus finally turned back to him, his expression unreadable. Then, in the same controlled, steady voice, he delivered the final blow. "You don't work here anymore." Richard stood motionless, his face burning with humiliation. No one spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of the showroom, where the other customers were now watching with wide eyes. Marcus didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked past Richard, his presence commanding the space, leaving behind nothing but silence and the weight of a lesson learned the hard way. Richard's face turned a shade paler as he finally grasped the magnitude of his mistake. He stammered, desperately trying to regain control. "Mr. Carter, I didn't realize." His once confident voice now wavered with panic. "This was just a misunderstanding. I was only trying to protect the dealership's standards." Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying him with the same measured calm that had unnerved him moments ago. "Protect the dealership's standards?" he repeated, his voice quiet but laced with meaning. "By judging someone before you even knew who they were?" Richard opened his mouth, then shut it. There was nothing left to say. From the side, some employees exchanged glances. A few looked relieved. It was clear now that Richard's arrogance wasn't just directed at Marcus. He had been dismissive, patronizing, and condescending to others before. His downfall felt inevitable. A younger salesman, one who had stayed quiet during the interaction, suddenly stepped forward. He looked at Marcus, hesitation in his posture. "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to apologize." His voice was steady but respectful. "I should have spoken up earlier." Marcus studied him for a moment before nodding. Then, with a small, knowing smile, he turned fully to face the young man. "What's your name?" "Daniel, sir." Marcus's expression didn't change. "Congratulations, Daniel. You're the new lead salesman now." A stunned silence followed. Richard's head snapped toward Marcus, eyes widening in disbelief. His replacement had just been chosen right in front of him. Marcus glanced at one of the senior executives. "Make sure security escorts him out. I don't tolerate this kind of leadership in my company." Richard's breath hitched, his gaze darting around the room, seeking help, an ally, anyone willing to defend him. But there was none. He had burned those bridges long before today. As security approached, Richard turned back to Marcus one last time. He looked as if he wanted to say something, but the weight of his own arrogance left him speechless. Marcus walked past him without another word. The lesson had already been delivered. As Richard was escorted out, the atmosphere in the showroom shifted. The same clients who had chuckled at Marcus earlier now watched him with admiration. Their smirks had disappeared, replaced by quiet respect. The man they had dismissed as just another visitor was, in fact, the most powerful person in the room. One by one, a few customers nodded in acknowledgement, understanding now that true wealth isn't always obvious. It doesn't always come with flashy jewelry or designer logos. It comes with confidence, knowledge, and the ability to make decisions that reshape an entire business in an instant. Marcus turned back to the staff, his voice steady but firm. "Let's get one thing straight," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "Respect should never depend on appearance. Ever." A few employees exchanged nervous glances, while others stood straighter, nodding. Some had been silent spectators to Richard's arrogance for far too long. Now they realized change was coming, real change. Marcus continued, his presence commanding but not unkind. From today forward, this dealership will operate differently. No assumptions, no dismissiveness, no treating customers based on what you think they can afford. Every client will be given the same level of professionalism and respect, because that's what real customer service looks like. There was no need for applause. The weight of his words was enough. As the tension eased, the doors to the showroom opened again. A new potential customer walked in, a middle-aged man in a simple sweater and jeans. Before anyone else could react, Daniel, the newly promoted lead salesman, stepped forward with a professional yet welcoming smile. "Welcome to Carter Aviation," he said warmly. "How can I assist you today?" Marcus watched the moment unfold, his expression unreadable, but as he turned to leave, a slight smile played on his lips. Change had begun. True power isn't just in wealth, it's in how you treat people, no matter who they are. Marcus didn't need to prove his worth to anyone, yet he used his position to teach a lesson that would resonate far beyond the walls of that showroom. Respect should never be based on appearance, and assumptions about status can lead to humiliation for those too blind to see past them. Have you ever seen someone get judged too soon, only for the truth to shock everyone? Share your story in the comments. Do you think people still assume wealth has a certain look? Let's talk about it. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in respect for all. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life stories. You won't want to miss what's next.